Okay. So this webinar is being recorded, and if you don't want to be part of the recording, then you need to write to me and let me know, and I'll take that out for you. Otherwise, this is going to be recorded and made available free on AMEE sites and elsewhere. So the idea is to promote this discussion. And so if you have not yet, please introduce yourself in the chat space, which is in the lower bottom of your screen. And we'll take it from there. So I wanted to bring up this issue about medical education. This is a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. And it says with proper diet, moderate, consistent exercise, and the development of a healthy mindset, it should be able to fit in fine. And it's kind of a joke because a square peg doesn't fit in a round hole. And my perspective is that medical education is stuck at its present point in terms of getting into a round hole. The medical education has made enormous improvements and enormous strides in the last 100 years. It's just been phenomenal. The underlying assumptions and the underlying process have enabled us to develop wonderful methods and techniques. However, the fundamental assumptions have not changed. And the fundamental assumptions are that everything can be predicted, controlled, and measured. And now that we've gotten into what I call wicked issues, it turns out that it's very difficult to deal with trust, with change, with faculty collaboration, with all the issues that require human beings to work together in medical education. And so it seems that we've come to the point where we have elaborated methods and techniques and now are stuck trying to get things to work. And I wanted to raise new questions and new possibilities in this blog and this webinar to regard old problems from a new angle and requires imagination and hopefully to make an advance in this. And so why am I talking about wicked issues? Why am I talking about this? Wicked issues, which we'll explore today, were originally developed by Rittel and Weber in 1973. And so it's been around for a while. And this is a picture of a foot stepping in gum. And it's in a metaphor for a wicked issue. You can't quite get rid of it, no matter what you try to do. And so today we're going to look at what is a wicked issue to try to clarify that and why it's important now to talk about wicked issues and what a wicked issue means for you and your work and your team, for your students, for your patients, for your colleagues and your family. So these issues that we're talking about affect a large number of people in different contexts at the same time. And so the options you have, the traditional approaches to solving problems will not work. And people don't know what to do and they don't know how to talk about it. And that's the purpose of this webinar. And so we'll talk about what we will propose to do. So what are some examples of wicked issues in medical education? Well, resistance to change. People have been changing the curriculum or trying to change the curriculum all over the world and still are, and finding resistance to change. And it's very, very difficult to deal with resistance to change through persuasion, through making arguments. Even evidence doesn't work. People will see evidence and say, I don't believe it, and resist it for personal reasons. There's a huge challenge out there now to develop clinical practitioners as teachers to develop more authentic learning, especially in residency, and to have teachers who are clinicians improve their skills. There's a conflict at every school that I know of between teachers and students and clinicians and researchers that all have priorities that are different. The teachers want to see patients, the clinicians want to see patients, the students want them to teach, there's not enough time, there's too many patients. People want to do research, they have to teach, they have to see patients. These are issues that have been around for a long time and they're getting worse and more difficult to solve. Integration is talked about and written about over and over and over again, and it's primarily understood that you add something to something else and then magically it's integrated. Well, integration by proximity, that is sequence, doesn't work. And we all pretend that it does, but it doesn't. The challenge of creating learning environments that are structured and have beginnings and endings, and yet are responsive to the needs of individual students and teachers and communities is a wicked issue. The idea of what is competence. We have defined competencies, and we measure and look at competencies, individual aspects. But the notion of competence has been elusive. It's a quality that you recognize when it's there, but it's not something you can put a number on. Trust is another issue. When Ola Tinkate brought up trust in entrustable professional activities in 2005, it's taken off and been huge worldwide. And now people are confronting the challenges of narratives and dialogue around issues of trust. And trust doesn't stay put, it keeps moving. The social determinants of health are a big deal. And inquiry and learning are all wicked issues. And I would say, in general, that medical education is a wicked issue itself. And equity of access to healthcare. Look at these issues. These are all wicked issues that traditional approaches to medical education, where you can identify a factor and then take care of a factor, doesn't
Stewart,
work. Yes?
Can I interrupt? Because I'm not sure if we should be seeing slides, but they're not on the screen.
Oh my goodness. Yes, you should be seeing slides. And why is that not happening? Thank you. Goodness me. Hang on a second. My apologies.
Go to share.
I am. I did share. Is that shared now? Are you
yes.
Seeing? Okay.
Good.
Okay, I'm going to go back then. Let me go back quickly to the visuals. My apologies. So, can you see this? Okay, I think that medical education right now is fabulous in methodologies and techniques, but in terms of getting things done and collaborating and working together, it's really difficult, and it's getting more and more difficult. It's a square peg in a round hole. And I think that we keep trying to push this through, and the issues we're confronting don't respond to traditional methods. And so I'm seeking to raise new questions, new possibilities for old problems, and take a new angle and looking at wicked problems, because we have not had a way in medical education to talk about these things. We just say, oh, it's complex. Oh, we can't do that. Or let's try this, or let's try that, and it doesn't work. And so we call these wicked issues because they don't respond to traditional methods. And I want to talk about what they are, what makes them important now, especially in this time, and what your wicked issues might look like, and what you might be able to do about it. So this is what I was up to when Claire helped me by saying that the share is not working. So these are the wicked issues that I think that I see now in the courses I've been teaching and the people with whom I've been discussing things. Most of you are involved in change, and you have a hard time getting people to change, stay changed. And you've discovered that persuasion doesn't really work so well. Developing clinical practitioners as teachers is a major problem. And we need clinicians to be teachers. Conflict among roles, the triple research, clinical care, and teaching has been very, very difficult. The integration of teaching, creating learning environments, competence, medical education, equity of access. So I want to ask you, look at this list. And I want to ask you now, what do these wicked issues have in common? Look at this list. What do these issues share? And if you would like, you can write your response in the chat space. What do these issues share? What do you think? Ron, Trevor, Pat, you have huge experience in this field. You recognize these as wicked, difficult issues to solve. What do they have in common? Now, Courtney writes that they require cooperation. And Scott writes scale. They're large. I think that's what Scott means. They're large, but in fact, they operate at every scale. Resistance to change operates at the level of the administration, operates at the level of departments, clinics, individuals, groups. Resistance to change may have a specific context, but it's still resistance to change. And so the notion that there could be something operating across many different scales at the same time is a new idea, and it's different. What else? They change shapes so that every time we think we fix them, they move. It's correct. Thank you, Claire. Differences, interests, complex power issues, all of these things come into play. Resistance to change, probably is the biggest one. And what we've tried is to persuade, to give workshops, to show things. People learn them, then go on their merry way and do whatever they want to do. Or 4 out of 5 teachers will change and 1 will throw a spanner in the wheel and stop everything. So what I want to talk about is what's common to these wicked issues. All of these wicked issues look differently depending on who's defining them. So if a student were to define a problem, let's say the students aren't doing well in a school. Some students, residents, are having a problem. The residents would say it's because the teachers aren't giving them enough time. The teachers would say that we haven't chosen residents well. The clinic director would say that the teachers aren't doing a good job. So each person has a different view of the problem. And when you get people together to discuss the issue, everybody's got a different perspective on what it might mean. So if you think the students aren't doing well, you might have remediation as a solution. If you think the teachers are unskilled, you might set up faculty development workshops. If you think the admissions process or the selection of residents or postgraduates is an issue, you might look at that. So people approach problems solutions depending on how they define the problems. And what we see is that not everybody agrees on the definition of the problem, but those in power make a decision and go ahead. The other thing we see is that these problems depend on the context, but they have patterns that cross contexts. And we'll talk about this in a minute. And then finally, these problems are impossible to solve completely. They just keep going. So think about this as like a chronic disease. These problems in medical education don't go away. They keep coming back over and over again. They keep progressing. They keep changing. The context may change. You may get older. You may get younger. You may move to another school, but the problem still is there. So the problems exist in a context and across contexts, both. And so what we want to do is look at this more carefully. And in the blog I wrote, I pulled some of this out. So first of all, the problems are defined differently from different perspectives. So the solution depends on how the problem is framed. So here's an example. Some teachers and practitioners are not collaborating with colleagues using new methods. They're resistant to change. This should be recognizable as a common problem for many of you. Even those of you that are teaching teachers will see that this is a problem. Is it a problem of teaching skills? More workshops. Is it a problem of time constraints? Negotiate jobs, patient load. Maybe I don't agree with these new methods. What are you going to do with people that don't agree with your methods, that have a different philosophy? You can't get rid of them. Push them to the side. Maybe people are frustrated with the system. They're tired of working so much for so little, and other things. So the solutions depend on the framing. And then stakeholders, let me see if I can do this. Stakeholders are people that have an interest in what's going on. So a stakeholder is a student in a medical school. A stakeholder is a teacher working in a hospital. A stakeholder is a public health worker. All those people have an interest in what's going on, and each one of them sees things differently. And yet you want to collaborate with all of them. Residents, fellows, and junior doctors in the United Kingdom feel like they're being asked to do too much. The patients are saying they're not getting enough. The medical students are not getting enough attention. People feel overworked, and so on. So each of these people has a stake and a different interest in what's going on. So when you get people together to solve a problem, you can't work with everyone individually about these issues. It's too much. And so what we find is that the constraints of the problem and the resources needed to solve it change over time. So in the late 60s and 70s, problem-based learning became very popular. And learning in small groups was great. People loved it. They fell in love with it. And as they implemented problem-based learning, they discovered they didn't have enough teachers. And so the groups got larger, or people didn't do problem-based learning, or it changed to team-based learning so they had more teachers. Authentic learning. When I was a student, authentic learning meant sitting in a lecture and listening to the teacher give a clinical example. Today, authentic learning means being in a setting. So the constraints of how we understand learning and the resources we need to solve it change. Clinical experience in a community was not possible until you were a senior in most schools. Today, you can do it as a freshman or as a mid-medical student. Information technology and simulation are examples of changes in resources around the same problems that have been going on for some time. So wicked issues have too many factors to hold, too many factors to measure, and they're just too much. A small change can make a big difference. I want to show you an example of a wicked issue, if I can get this to work. Here is a video from YouTube. Hopefully this will work. Let me get rid of this. And what it will show is this is an intersection in Hong Kong, and I want to advance this to 2 minutes. This is actually in Japan. So here we have an intersection full of people. I want to pause it. You see hundreds of people around here. At the corner, you see a crosswalk. You see cars going back and forth. Let's watch what happens. They're all waiting for the light to turn green. Cars are going by. People are obeying the rules. But there's nobody organizing the people, saying, stand here, you stand there. The light turns green. Everybody goes. Do you think they're going to crash into each other? Is somebody directing traffic here? Watch what happens. Suddenly, people form lines. Suddenly, people begin to follow the person in front of them. Suddenly, people avoid each other. And there's a pattern of passing lines that emerges suddenly. Can you see it? This is self-organization, that each person is behaving with an individual choice. In this case, keep moving, follow the person in front of you, don't bump into anybody. All these people are following the same rules, even though nobody's got the rules written on a flip chart. All these people are following the same rules individually without knowing what other people are doing. This is how complex systems, wicked issues unfold. So medical education, bunch of students entering their classroom, suddenly they're following simple rules. accreditation, all the processes that we see as wicked issues actually follow the rules of this kind of behavior. And yet we try to solve them by identifying a single factor. Can you identify a single factor here that's influencing everybody in terms of what they're doing? Do you see anybody in charge? And so one of the issues about wicked issues is that they're complex and they behave differently. And these kinds of differences, this is different than one correct answer. There's no single correct path. There's no one telling everybody what to do. There's too many factors involved to control. And so this is what wicked issues actually look like when you study them. So the problem is actually never solved. People, let's say you're in a school, you're on the curriculum committee, and effectively people walk into the room and sit down. It's just like people crossing the street. They walk in and sit down. Everybody's got a different opinion of what the problem is in a curriculum committee. Everybody's got a different history. Everybody defines the issues that they need differently. And then new people come in and people leave. And you're trying to deal with issues. And then somebody comes back from an AMEE meeting and says, I just saw this new methodology and we want to put it in our school. And other people say, no, no, no. And then, so we decide to have faculty development. And everybody goes once to faculty development, and then they've checked their list and they never go back again. And you go to these great courses. You take AMEE courses with Trevor Gibbs or Ron Harden, and you learn these fabulous things. You go back to your school, and you can't quite get it implemented, and you can't quite understand why. And it's because you're walking across the street in traffic trying to do a single thing. There are no quick fixes, and it's very difficult to sustain wicked issues. And so, and people get moralistic about it. They think that they can predict where people are going to go in crossing the street. And they want to say, they define success as this person getting to this place at this time, when in fact you can't control that. And there's a very interesting study done by Arrow and Henry in 2010, in which they looked at 26 different resident teams implanting cardiac catheters in hospitals. They all received the same instruction. They all were working under similar conditions, but some teams were really highly functional and some teams were dysfunctional. And I asked the question, what's the difference between teams that are working well and teams that are not working well? It's a very interesting paper. They also looked at mental health issues in psychiatry. What they found was that people that communicated clearly with each other, people that gave space for other people to lead when they could and step back when other people had ideas, the people that interacted well had the best functional teams. And they actually looked at the details of that. And so it's really important to be able to work with wicked issues. Now so I want to spend some time talking about how to work with these wicked issues. But I want to pause now and ask for questions and comments at this point before I go into what to do. So I'm going to pause here and ask in the chat space, or you can click and speak if you wish. We'll have a couple of minutes of discussion about wicked issues. And I want to ask you to think about, what's your wicked issue? What wicked issues are holding you that you can't solve, that keep coming back over and over again? You all have them.
Yeah, let me share my wicked issue with you to stop the quiet. I, as you say, go around the world developing faculty, give the AMEE courses and follow-on courses. I always worry that I'm leaving behind an incredibly frustrated group of people who know what they want to do, but because, as you say, very often people have different perceptions at different levels as the importance of education. I know that they become frustrated because they can't carry out what they would like to do and what I would like them to do. They also feel frustrated because when I go back, they then think, well, we're not going to be able to tell Trevor that we put these things into place. I try to solve that with sort of accepting that I'm going to create frustration in those people. But I'm not quite sure how else I can solve that, to me, which is a wicked issue.
Trevor, this is Trevor Gibbs speaking. I don't know if people can.
Sorry.
And Trevor Gibbs is a very sophisticated teacher with huge experience, and he's now saying that he senses this. I too, Trevor, have the same feeling, and I think all of us do. And the point is this, that we have it's like immunology. You get a single immunization and you think you're good for life. And then it wears off after a while, and you're still in life being exposed to all the things you're exposed to. The main issue, Trevor, is that we don't prepare people to work collaboratively with others who don't understand what they're talking about. That the people who take the workshops that you offer go back excited and interested, and then they encounter a wall of people that have not been in the workshop and don't know what to do, and they get discouraged. And one of the issues that we're going to talk about in just a minute is that people try to go over a mountain in one leap. They say, okay, we're going to change assessment. We're going to institute entrustable professional activities. We're going to put in, we're going to have OSCEs. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to develop small group teaching. We're going to train preceptors throughout the province. And they try to accomplish huge goals that they can't do. They have wonderful goals and ideas, but they don't know how to take the first small step. They try to take one step and then get back to work. They think the problem can be solved immediately by a single intervention. And Trevor, we teach people about things and give them the idea that if they do this, then things will be fine. And it's too big. We teach them the idea or the technique, but we don't teach them how to go about implementing change in where they work. And that's what I want to talk about. And that's my main goal in this series of webinars and this series of blogs, is to introduce how do we talk about this. And I think, Trevor, your comment is right on. It's completely the experience that almost everyone I know that has some involvement in medical education, either with residents or medical students or clinics or health systems, even the UK health system, they all have this issue. They try to do too much too fast, get frustrated, and quit. Or they don't feel like they have a solution for you when you come back. It's because they're trying to eat the whole meal in one bite. And they don't have the patience and the technique and the methods to go at it in a way that will work. This is typical of wicked issues. How about others? Take just another minute. Is there another comment or something in the chat space? I know I like Janet's comment that it's a relief to hear that there are wicked issues in medical education. You know, Janet, the other thing that's a relief to hear about wicked issues is you don't have to solve them. You can't solve the problem, Trevor. You can't solve it. You can work with it. You can work at it, but you can't end it. It never goes away. Okay, and you could, and it's context specific, because you can be in Shanghai, you can be in Guangzhou, you can be in Xi'an, you can be in Beijing, and you'll see the same problem over and over and over again. So the problem for those people is in their context, but you can see the same problem across. And so it's a pattern of problems. It's not a problem, it's a pattern. And one of the things we need to start talking about in medical education is patterns of problems, not the problem itself. Because the pattern, like the people crossing the street, is created by something else than what we think it is. Okay, we think it's a problem of not remembering. We think it's a problem of power and hierarchy. We think it's this, we think it's that. When in fact, complex, wicked issues unfold in different ways than what we're used to thinking about. And once we learn to think about them, we can approach them and work with them. And that's what I want to talk about. So last chance for someone to make a comment before we go on and look at how to deal with wicked issues.
Ronald here,
Yes.
Stewart, thanks for your presentation so far, great. I wonder, for me, a wicked issue is the fact that people are looking for the one best answer to whether it's PBL, whatever, and that the trouble is there is no magic bullet, there's no single best answer in medical education. And yet, you know, research papers are looking at method A or better than method B or whatever. And there's no one best answer, yet people are always looking for the best answer.
And why do you think that is, Ron? What do you think sets that set of values in place? Why is it that for the last 100 years, that's what we've been doing?
I think it's partly I suppose a research background that people are thinking there must be one. It's oversimplifying the issues and wanting to preach, believe, so there's not a dissonance that they've got to go into one camp or other. They've got to be PBL or not for PBL. They've got to be for integration or against integration, and or the for flipped classrooms or not. And it's otherwise there's a dissonance.
Well, dissonance and uncertainty means failure in traditional medical education and medicine. If you don't have an answer, then people think you're unqualified. If you don't have the right answer, you don't get credit. And if you have an experiment in a laboratory which you've controlled as many variables as possible, it doesn't turn out, then you think you've failed and you have to do something else. And so the notion that there's a correct answer, that there's a cause and an effect, and if you don't get the effect that you predict or the reliability that you want, that you failed, you've got it wrong, or whatever, you get frustrated. And this thinking of cause and effect only works in controlled circumstances. Cause and effect only works on a multiple choice test and only works in very controlled, low variable situations. When you have answers that are not available, then the only thing you have are questions. That's your best resource. And this is the first thing that we want to teach young people and teachers who teach, that you don't need to have an answer, you need to have a question. And as you learn in problem-based learning and in clinical work, that the best questions are much better than the answers, because the answers will change over time, but the ability to ask questions is your best bet. And there are three questions that I want to introduce that work in diagnosis, they work in medical education, they work in research, they work everywhere. And it's really simple and easy. The first question is what? What do you observe? What's the data? What do you perceive? What are you going to measure? And think about it. You have a patient come in, what do you observe? What do you perceive? What's the data? You have a student going back to a school, realizing that the multiple choice questions are poorly written. They know what they have to do, they know what's wrong, they know where the people are, okay? So it's very clear, we do what very well in science and medical education. Here's what we don't do well. And Trev, this is in part an answer to your question, and Ron too. So what does it mean for you that people are writing poor multiple choice questions? We don't talk about that so much. We might talk about how to measure quality of questions, but we don't talk about what it means for your clinic director, or what it means for your patients, or what it means for the department or the clinic or the community that the assessment is not accurate. What's the impact of inaccurate assessment on the clinic? What's the impact of residents getting poor feedback? All of that stuff then leads to the wicked problem together. All those factors combine in an uncontrollable way. So asking what it means beyond yourself, what does it mean for Trevor that he teaches the AMEE courses and he comes away with this feeling? What does it mean for the students when they leave your course, Trev? What does it mean for the people they go back home and start talking to? So all of those things start unfolding outside of your vision, outside of your control. You really can't control that. And so we get frustrated. And so the secret is to make meaning and take informed action based on what you have meaning. Let me clarify these questions. So the first question that we want to ask in all of these wicked issues, doesn't matter, is what do we see? So up in the right-hand corner, you see what, so what, now what, the three questions. And these go around iteratively. So what is a discovery question? Very important in diagnosis, very important in medical education, very important in teaching. And most teaching describes what is this, what is that? This is a heart, this is the chamber, this is the valve, this does that, and the patterns you see. And so what is about what do you know, what do you see, what do you hear? Think of clinical skills. What's the history of this patient? What's the story behind this experimental paradigm? What's the story behind these students that come to take your AMEE course? When you look across the people in your class, you see this huge diversity. And you think, how am I going to get all these people to the same spot at the same time? When I look at the people crossing the street in that video, I think, wow, there's no way these people are going to be able to get across the street without bumping into each other. And then we let them go and we let them self-organize. And instead of directing them, we study the conditions that affect them. And so there's diversity, and in that diversity, it's the connections between people that make the difference. So, Trev, if we could teach people how to connect with the knowledge that they have and the experience they've gained in the workshops, we could make huge progress. So it's not enough to know the thing, you have to know about the interactions of the things. And so the first question then is what do you see, what's going on? The next question is, so what does that mean for you? So what? And so what leads to understanding. Understanding is what we're after most of the time, especially in wicked issues, because understanding is not the right answer. Understanding is, what does it mean for you, Trev, that these people go away? It's unsettling for you. You wish you could do something about it. You wish you could explain it. You wish you could understand why these things happen. There's so many interdependencies. And we wish we could understand the implications, what's working and what's not working. So what we see often in medicine and medical education is that people go from what they see to action without contemplating what it means. So in wicked issues, it's the making of meaning, not the right answer. So for example, in this webinar, I have no idea if people are understanding what I'm talking about, and I can't control it, and I can't predict it. What I can do is sense what I'm doing and take an action based on my sense. It's just the way you correct yourself, Trevor and Ron, when you're giving a talk or when you're giving a workshop. You self-correct all the way as you go. You start things, you change things, you do things differently as you teach. The same way those people crossing the street self-decide as they go. And so it's the ability to be aware of meaning and make a decision based on that meaning that helps you move through a wicked issue. So you ask yourself, what does it mean when I'm teaching this course to other people? Well, I don't know. Maybe I should ask them if I don't know. Maybe I should do a survey. Maybe I should find out what it means. And then you discover that what it means to them and what it means to you is completely different. And then you sit down and talk about what could be done about that. And so what would change? What is likely to change if we don't do this, if we do that? There's no right answer. You can't apply traditional methods here. What might be unintended consequences? So what options do I? So let's think about Trevor's example. So what options does Trevor have? Well, He could talk differently about the things he's teaching. He could mention to students that this is a problem and ask them what they think. He could have small group discussions after the course amongst people in the follow-up about the problems they're facing. He could look for common issues across and begin to talk about those. There are many, many things to be done, but he can't solve the problem. He can address it and stimulate people to engage and work on it. Think of it as a chronic issue rather than an acute problem. And here's the kicker, Trevor. So what can you actually do? You can't send out a blurb across all of China and change everybody in one blurb. And you can't fly to every city and meet with every student all at once. The main thing that you can do, Trevor, is to change something you're doing, because you have influence over all those people when you see them. So what small change could you make in teaching the AMEE courses that would make a difference in the direction of reducing the frustration that people might have when they get home? That's the beginning of an adaptive action in a wicked issue. And so you begin to think about, what action could I take? What small step could I take, rather than what big thing can I do? What small step can I take that's most likely to help? Not what big jump can I take to get rid of this problem all at once and then move on to something else because I'm so pressed for time. What can we do? Who can do that? What, if I want to make one small change, what might success look like if I made that small change? And how would I measure success in that small change? Would I hear less of that complaint? Would people come back and say, that's great, it's really working? And who needs to know about this? And how can I frame this to this group? And how long should I expect this to last? And what constraints would I be facing? Trev, is this making sense to you as a way to go? Taking small steps instead of trying to solve the whole thing?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting, because the frustration led me to think of the wicked issue and how to solve it. And I quite like the circle type, the what, so what, now what. And I suppose we all could actually predict that one of the wicked issues was going to be this. And I've actually turned the AMEE courses on its head. So it's an understanding that it's a long journey which starts with only small steps, but you can't start it without those small steps. And actually addressing the frustration right at the very beginning of the action. Just like you're saying, then, you know, I can hear.
Hang on a second. Hang on a second. I'm sorry, my duck went off. That's my timer. So this, it's exactly right, Trev. If you look at the what, so what, now what, and at the end of it, someone's mic is on and there's kind of chewing and noise. So if you all could mute, that would be great. Thank you. So now, see if your mic is on. Let me see if I can mute all. I don't know. Let's see, mute my audio. No, I can't. So what, so what, and now what as a circle. Once you make a small change, Trev, once you realize the frustration, the next time you ask yourself what, it's going to be different. It's not the same what. The conditions now, you're aware of this frustration and you can see what it means to you. And so you go around this cycle differently, and then you go again and you go again. And what I'm saying here is that you don't make one big leap to solve this problem, that you move slowly in steps that are possible for you in that wicked issue. And you see what happens. And if it works well, you keep going. If it doesn't, you change. It seems so stupid and so silly, but it gets you moving through a wicked issue. It enables you to do something without this huge frustration. And it's not that hard. Does this make sense? And there's actually methods and techniques I have not talked about. I'm going to be giving 6 webinars and 6 blogs over the next 6 months. And my plan is to go deeper and deeper into this. But this webinar is very basic. It just says there are wicked issues and there's a way to deal with them that doesn't lead to frustration. So what we observe is that wicked issues challenge your old ways of doing things. They say that what you've tried in the past hasn't worked, or what you've tried won't stay solved. And there's too many people crossing the street to be able to control everything. I just can't handle it. You know what I'll do? I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and wait for something to change. I remember when we were changing the curriculum in New Mexico, people would say, you know what? I'm not going to do anything. I'll just wait. And everybody sits around waiting. And so the massive dependencies and the inability to move leads us to this problem again. That we keep trying, if we can't solve the problem, we keep trying to jam the peg in. What I'm suggesting, Trev, is that you make a small change that's doable and you try it. What do you think I'm doing today? I'm making a small blog and a small webinar. I've been working at this for years. I've been studying this stuff for years. This is my adaptive action. This is what I'm trying to do. And what it means is that I'm trying to disturb the status quo of thinking about wicked problems. That they're not so difficult to deal with. That if you use something as simple as what, so what, now what? Sorry, excuse me. If you use something as simple as what, so what, now what? We say what, so what, and now what? You can use these in any problem setting, Trev. You can start out a course and say, what we're going to do today is this, this, and this, and this. And why is this important? Bang, so what? We do this all the time, but we're not aware of it. And we say, so what does this mean for you at home? What would this approach to assessment mean when you go back home? What kind of issues are you going to face when you get home? So you may know how to set up a mini CEX or an OSCE, but people aren't going to want to do it. And you're going to try to talk them into it and you're going to fail because persuasion doesn't work in complex issues. You can't stand in the middle of the street and tell somebody walking towards you in that mess, wait a minute, go around, don't go there. They're not going to listen to you. And so we have to approach wicked issues differently. And I'm, over the next several months, I'm going to show methods, techniques that work for organizing people to work together, for shared problem solving, for leadership, for wicked problems. This is my intention. This is my goal. And this is free. There's no money changing hands here. I'm not getting paid. This is my own time. AMEE's donating the services of Claire and the generosity of Ron and Pat Lilly, and the Human Systems Dynamics Institute is donating its methodology, and I'm synthesizing both for you. And that's the purpose here. I really want people to become aware of this so that the dialogue changes, the discussion changes, and most of all, I would like the questions to change. And so there's a difference, Courtney, between passion and explanation. I'm passionate, you can tell, about my teaching and my work, but it's not an explanation. Passion doesn't convince people, at least not in medical education. Maybe at home it does, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work in the workplace. You need to be able to take action that makes a difference. So Trev, I would ask this question: what's the difference that can make a difference in your next AMEE course? What's the smallest thing you could do? The smallest thing you could do that might make a difference. And you don't know if it's going to work until you try it. And so that's the way you go forward. It's like working with chronic illness. Okay? It's a chronic problem. Wicked issues are chronic problems. You can't have a single solution and put it on the shelf. You have to keep going. So I'm running out of time, and I want to stop and open it up for discussion. and see what people are thinking, because I think that this is the 21st century solution that we are looking for and that we need, and we don't quite know how to do it. What do you think? What comments and reactions? The chat space. I'll be back next month. Keep your eyes on MedEdWorld for the next announcement of the next blog. I'll write a short blog. What I plan to do next month is talk about, well, I'll show you what I plan to do next month. Hang on a second. I think I have it here. I plan to continue and look at wicked issues in terms of certainty and uncertainty, stability and instability, replication, adaptation, simple, complex, and what you can do about it. So this, I think, is the central problem in medical education, is we don't know how to get across these barriers. And I think what, so what, now what, and pattern making. I want to talk next time about patterns, because the pattern of the people crossing the street is what we're concerned about. What creates the pattern? What creates the pattern in workshops that people go home frustrated when they get home? We should be looking at the patterns across contexts, because we have similar problems everywhere. And I want to talk what patterns mean. Patterns have, I'm going to go into this in the next blog. So I want to stop here and open it up for comments and questions in the few minutes that we have left. What questions are on your minds right now?
Stewart, do you, sorry to hog the conversation, do you have to endure the wicked issues before you can before you can solve that what? Or is an element of predictability and foresight relevant to this? Or is it something that we have to endure first of all to solve that what bit?
No, it's a good question, Trev. Thank you. First of all, I don't endure what. I just ask, what do I see? What do I observe? I don't let it say, oh, I feel horrible. This is terrible. The feel horrible, this is terrible is, so what does it mean for you? Okay. So I'm frustrated is what it means to me. And what can I do to alleviate my frustration is the now what. But the what itself is what you observe and what you see. Cold, clear observation, the data, the facts. And if you can't measure it, no problem. What do you see? I see that this group is not working well. I don't know why. So what does it mean for me? So I've been giving this workshop and people aren't working well together. And so what can I do? I can sit down at the table and I could say, I can ask a question. I could say, does it seem like this group is working well together? So that's taking an action in the moment with my frustration with the group or with their frustration. It's as simple as that. That's not the answer, but that's the action. And if it doesn't work, I try something else. So Trev, you don't solve what, you observe what. You don't solve so what until you take an action. The so what just stays there. So I listen to this patient, I see this patient, I hear the history, I do the physical, I look at the labs. So what does this mean for me? Well, as a clinician, I think this is this. So what does it mean for this patient? Well, it's completely different what it means for her. So what does it mean for the family of this patient? It's completely different. What does it mean for the director? You can't solve it. You just ask, what does it mean? And based on that, you say, what can I do now that's accessible? Well, you know what? I can't cure this disease, but let's look in the literature and see what's going on right now and see what we can come up with. Okay?
So you've got to make sure that it's not a subjective concept, it's really objective then. No, I disagree. Your meaning is subjective for you. If you want to see what's in the literature, then it's objective. If you want to see what other people are doing, then it's normative. Yeah.
Okay? So subjectivity is fine. In complex issues, it's really a major source of dealing with uncertainty, because uncertainty is subjective, Trev.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I wanted to say at the beginning, but I didn't, is that I want to rehabilitate uncertainty in medical education. We have thrown uncertainty out of the experimental lab, out of the clinical trial, and out of medical education as if it's unacceptable. But uncertainty is the source of solutions for wicked problems, because you have to try things.
Sure. Could I ask back to the definition of a wicked issue as something where it's difficult or impossible to solve? Are there any situations? Your assumption is that there always is some solution. Are there any
No, the
situations
assumption is that there is. The solution is to keep trying. There's not
but are there times when one should accept that it's impossible and there isn't a solution, and don't waste your time trying to move on to something else?
Well, do you think there's a solution to medical education, Ron?
To bits of it.
Bits of it. That we can solve bit by bit by bit by bit, but we can never get our hands around it. What I'm saying is that the solution is to keep learning. The solution is to keep going at it in cycles of adaptive action. It's the only thing you can do in a complex, wicked issue, is to keep going around what, so what, now what. Nothing else works.
So we should never accept that there's no solution. That
Yes,
there always
correct.
has to be a solution.
And you can accept the fact, Ron, that you don't have to solve it. If there's no solution, then you're not responsible for solving that problem. You can take a breath. What you can do is say, I'm working at this in this way. And then you can look at the resident and say, is this resident or is this clinician working at this in a way that goes around the adaptive action cycle? Is the resident saying what and seeing it clearly? Is the resident saying so what in a way that takes different points of view into account? And is the action that they're taking make sense on the so what?
But the definition then of a wicked issue is something where it's difficult or impossible to solve. You would remove impossible.
Well, let me go back. Hang on a second. Let me go back. Your question is great, Ron. And if I can just get back here, let's see, where are we? A wicked issue is a problem that has different definitions depending upon who's saying it. A wicked issue is something that you don't solve completely. The third one, it's impossible to solve in a traditional sense, Ron. There's no traditional solution to equity of access to health. There's no traditional solution to the social determinants of health. There's no one solution that's going to get you there. You work at it. You work at it. There's no traditional solution to, look at malaria, one of the most devastating diseases, and we keep trying to make vaccines and they keep mutating. We keep trying to sterilize male flies and mosquitoes, and the genetics changes. You keep working at it. One of the messages, Ron, I think it's really important for medical education, is that wicked problems exist. They're real. And instead of trying to solve them, we should work with them. Now, in my next blog, I'm going to talk about traditional problems and what's the difference between traditional problems that do have solutions and wicked problems that don't.
Yeah.
So, for example, in medical education, we want to replicate things. We want to replicate what an OSCE is. We want everybody to know what an OSCE is. So we want everyone to know what makes a good multiple choice question. The stem looks like this, the options look like this, and we want to replicate that. We don't want to create it de novo every time. There are things that we need to replicate. Every vaccine that we use should be identical. Every medicine, when I open the jar, every pill should be identical. We need replication. Though I'm not talking about those issues, okay? I'm not, every student should know some anatomy and apply it to clinical skill. Every student should be able to do a clinical exam. Those have solutions that we can solve and we can measure. I'm talking about the issues for which there are no solutions per se in that sense. Okay, every student should be able to do suturing and close a wound. Okay, but the reason the wounds are happening is a wicked issue. It's violence and social determinants. Those are different things. And we don't talk about this stuff in medical education. We just give methods as if everything could be solved. And I want to disturb that idea, because it leads people to be frustrated. Trevor, your first question was so good. I want people to know that I didn't put you up to asking that question. You're on mute, Trev.
I'll give you the money back then, okay.
Okay. Ron, are you satisfied with wicked issues not having solutions?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I'm just wondering if there are, I'm still in my mind trying to think of a few things where there may be no solution. And should we then not, or is it, we can accept partial solutions, but are there some things which are impossible? It's back to this, because I think it's often defined as wicked issues where the difficult or impossible. And I'm just hanging on to the word impossible. If that's the case, if they really are impossible, then we should accept that. Is the first decision about an issue is to say, can we do anything about this, or can't we? If it's impossible, then let's leave that and move on to something else.
Well, if your definition of success is 100% difference, or if your definition of success is unachievable, then there's no solution. If you change the definition, and in the cases of wicked problems, the definition of success is being able to make a small difference and keep working at it. If that's the definition of success, then there's a solution to a wicked problem. It's to keep working and keep learning. If the solution of a traditional problem is to solve it and move on, then you can't do that in a wicked problem. So you set success up with a single definition that only applies to closed, limited systems, and it can't apply to complex, wicked issues, Ron. That's the conundrum you're having. So the solution to wicked problems exists. It's adaptive action. It's small adaptive action steps. And I'm telling you this because there's a theory under this that's mathematical, that's complex, that works, it's physical, it's chemical. I didn't go into deep theory here because it's not the point of this talk, but I'm not making this up. This is theoretically extremely well worked out and studied. In fact, Nobel Prizes have been given for this work. So the solution here is to realize that you can't predict the outcome of a wicked issue. You can't control the outcome of a wicked issue. You can't fix the context for everybody. Pardon? So I think I'm glad that you're puzzled about this, Ron, because that's the beginning of making meaning about this for me. You've heard me talk about this for a long time. What I'm trying to do is to disturb the idea that success equals 100% solution. That success in medical education is to keep working at it and keep learning and keep applying and keep trying to figure out what works and doesn't work and to keep studying it. So that may sound silly, but we send people away thinking that there's solutions to everything if they just do this technique and that method and this approach. We teach problem-based learning as 7 steps. And I go places and people say, well, what step are you on? And I say, there are no steps. But that's what happens. People try to make procedures out of nonlinear events, and they get stuck. And so people are stuck trying to put a square traditional approach in a round wicked issue hole. That's the message. And the simplest approach that I've offered today is adaptive action. Next month, I will offer a more sophisticated additional method. I'm going to add methods and techniques in every webinar. And what I suggest is that people try them. Claire writes that Claire, do you want to say this instead of writing it?
I can say it.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I agree that these kind of problems will never be solved completely because they change. As soon as you think you've fixed it, one of the factors in it has already changed. And I think the best we can go for is, this is the best we can do right now with what we've got, or this is the best out of all the options that we've considered, or this is the option that I'm going to try and we'll see how it goes. And I think that's where the adaptive actions are going to come in.
Right. You have to give yourself permission to try. You have to give yourself permission to try something to see if it makes a difference. And if you try, then things are different. You're different, and the thing you're working on is different. And then you look again and you say, what changed? Now what does it mean to me? And now what can I try next? This didn't work. So what's different? I'm different now. I'm going to try something else. It's so simple that it seems to be dismissible. It's too simple. However, if you think about leadership of an organization, if you think about National Health Service, if you think about all these issues, what you see is people trying to solve huge problems with single leaps or large solutions and forcing them on systems, and it doesn't work. And so I really think that it's important that we look at wicked issues, we accept them. In fact, Jen Cleland published a paper in Medical Teacher just recently on wicked issues. The admissions process to medical school is a wicked issue. Every school has its own admissions process, so there's a context in every school. And yet every school is different. So there's a pattern to admissions processes. And we ask ourselves, just the way I asked Ron, what influences the way we think? What are the underlying assumptions? It used to be that if you had 99%, if you were in the 99th percentile, you could automatically get into a medical school. But it didn't matter if you were a psychopath or had never worked with people or couldn't speak clearly. Now we look at behavior, we look at community service, we look at different things that we have changed the meaning of admissions over time. We have learned through experimental approaches and small steps, and that's what I'm talking about.
Stuart, I'm enamored with your analogy to a square peg in a round hole and the use of the word stuck, because if I've got a round hole and a square peg, I'm not stuck. It's only when I jam that square peg into the round hole that I'm stuck. And I wonder if some of these wicked issues is because we have tried to adapt, to force, to imply consequences of certain things, that we've ended up being stuck simply because we've said this is the only way you can do this, when we've not actually used the idea of the circles, what, so what, now what activity.
I agree with you, Trev, and I'll just mention the notion of reductionism. I remember a past AMEE talk and where Jeff Norman was on stage talking about all of this stuff can be reduced and studied in its parts. And I asked him if he thought everything could be reduced to parts, studied and reassembled as a perfect whole. And he said yes, and he thought reductionism was the only way to approach medical education. And we had this argument. And so at that point, he was jamming the square peg in a round hole. And I think many people are trying, rather than take a problem apart into its pieces, just look at it as a round, wicked issue. Look at what's a square issue and work with each of them. Okay, there are solutions to the square and there are adaptive actions to the round. And I would tell you one other thing, Trev, that adaptive action works with square pegs as well. With multiple choice questions, what's the issue? What does it mean? I don't know how to write them. What can I do? I can learn how to write them, and I can check the index of the questions later. So there's a solution for what, so what, now what. It's so easy that it's not a problem. But if we start talking about why is the assessment system at my school not integrated? Why is everybody doing their own assessment and there's no coherence across even the blocks within a single year, much less across the clerkships or the residencies, then you're in a wicked issue, right? And so if we want to solve the issues that face us, we have to work together in wicked issues. That's the point. So I think I'm going to stop now because I'm over time. And what I want to do is I'm going to unshare just for a moment and tell you what's next. Let me come out of this. Hang on a second. I want to thank everybody for hanging in there with me. And I want to, hang on a second. I want to just move my screen. Give me your patience for a moment. And I want to share that I've set up a place to have a discussion about this. Let's see, a share screen. I set up a screen called Padlet because I didn't have a place to do this. This is a screen, and in the blog, there is a link, a bit.ly link to this place. And you can see it's Wicked Issues in Medical Education. And I write, what has you stuck? What are your wicked issues? And you can add a comment here. My wicked issue is, and then you can put it in here. Here's the adaptive action cycle. Here is the blog itself that I wrote. And I'm going to put the slides from this webinar here on this site. So anybody in the world could come here free and talk about their wicked issues. And we could begin to learn together and have a discussion. That's it. And we could move this to AMEE if you wish. Or I just did this because I didn't have the resources to go any further. I'm trying to disturb the status quo and move this discussion forward. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew about this. And somebody's dog is telling me it's time to stop. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to apologize for the, thank you, Ariana, for the link. There's the bit.ly link. Mishan, great to see you. I want to thank everybody for their patience. Hello, Imad. I'm glad you're here. And I want to thank you all for coming in. And I want to invite you to come back because this is about learning. There's no money, there's no requirements, there's no nothing. It's all about learning a different language to address the issues we really face in medical. We can make much more progress if we stop trying to solve wicked issues with solutions that don't exist. Well, change process is our biggest problem. Resistance is our biggest problem. And this is the way to go forward. So I want to thank you very much. And I've recorded this and I will put it in a Dropbox and make it available to everyone. Or if Ron or Amy wants to put it on site with the slides, I can do that too. Claire, if you would discuss this with Pat and Ron, make a decision, let me know. And then we'll do whatever people think is best for everyone. And so I would also really appreciate more notice on the splash page of AMEE in the future saying this webinar is happening on this day and this is whatever. Claire, you can speak for me at the next conference. I really would like people to know about this. I would like thousands of people to tune in and start this discussion and bring it to AMEE and bring it to the literature. So that's the point. And Trevor, I want to thank you for your questions. They were terrific. I really appreciate it. And you know what, Trev, one of these days I would like to do an AMEE with you or a workshop together. I think we'd be a really interesting team. I really have a great learning experience together. Who knows, one day. There's a wicked issue for you. So with that, I will say goodbye and thank you all. And I appreciate everybody being here. And I look forward to seeing you again. And please spread the word for next time, okay? And Claire McRae, thank you so much for your support. And Pat and Ron, thank you. And Glenda Oyoung, Thank you from the Human Systems Dynamics Institute. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.